Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the Springford Area School District Special Meeting on Monday, July 11th, 2022 at 7:30 p.m. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The Springford Board of School Directors believes the community has the right to bring before the board issues and concerns they may have about items on the agenda or about items in general which affect the district or their children. Because of this belief and philosophy, the board will schedule a time at the beginning and conclusion of every meeting to have an opportunity for community members to share their concerns with the board. At the start of the meeting, members from the public may comment on agenda items only. The school board will move through the meeting agenda. Then at the end, when prompted, there will be a time for public comment. This meeting is being filmed to be broadcast on community cable channels and online. Individuals attending to make public comment should be aware that they are being videotaped. Speakers will be asked to state their name and the area in which you reside before your comment.
All right, well, good evening, and thank you for coming tonight to this special meeting in which we are looking to find a candidate who would be able to take the place for Ms. Sullivan for the remainder of her term on our school board. According to the agenda, we will have first the public to be heard. This will be on any topic. It does not need to be relevant to the agenda. There will not be a public to be heard at the end of the agenda. So at this time, if there is anybody in the audience here in our building who would like to speak, then they could approach the podium. Since no one here is approaching the podium, are there anyone on Zoom?
Steve F., you may now make a public comment. Please unmute yourself and state your first and last name, as well as your township.
Steve Fry, Royersford, PA. First, I'd just like to state that I believe this process is a little odd. We're giving a significant amount of say in who is accepted into this board position to people who aren't from the zone this person will represent. If the school leaders truly believed in EDI or even representative government, this process should have been overhauled so that the people who are going to be represented by this person would have more of a say in who's selected. Also, under normal election circumstances, we would know at least the party affiliations of the candidates. I'm hoping that will be shared during this process. We routinely see board votes break along political party lines, so it seems very relevant. I know at least some people felt discouraged from seeking this position because they believed the board's history of party-based voting would almost certainly eliminate them from consideration. So I think disclosure of party affiliation will allow the public to see if that type of bias is going to be in play this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else on Zoom? Is no one else at this time on Zoom? Then we will proceed with our agenda. So at this time, we would like to talk about the procedures that we will be following for this evening. And Mr. Fitzgerald, can you speak to this?
I can, and certainly Mr. Rizzo or Dr. Wright, you could fill in as well. There will be the interview phase of the evening where it's my understanding that individuals who are not being interviewed would not be in the room during the time period of the interview. Following the interview process, which based on our discussion at the last board meeting was going to be approximately a 10-minute window per applicant. There are 3 established questions. However, between questions, should a response elicit follow-up questions by members of the board, I'll probably defer to you to look to the board members if they have follow-up questions. Following the interview phase of the evening, then we would go into discussion, and then at that point there would be a voting process. That I would think what we should do is once we get through, shall we say, section 2. And the discussion part of the evening, then we reiterate what the process would be for nomination and the like.
Thank you. Mr. Rizzo, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
What I have to say is more relevant towards the actual voting process. I would say that I think the board did feel comfortable with having the board members be in a separate space. The art room will be, you'll be escorted to the art room by Ms. Crew. And then we are asking, I believe we're asking for technology to not be accessible while they're in that room so that it's a fair shake for everybody. So we'd ask you to not have your technology out. Ms. Crew would escort you back and forth, and then we'll bring you all back in at the end.
All right, I think the question also had come up with the board. Are you comfortable with after each candidate has their 10 minutes, having them remain here? Or did you feel that they should go back to the other room?
They should return to the other room. That way they don't know what the response to the questions of the previous candidate.
All right, members of the board comfortable with after each person is interviewed that they would return to the
I think that's
the room?
fair. That's fine.
All right. So the one other thing that I did want to add, and I did, if the board, if any of the board members wanted to add anything, was I know that I would like to thank all of the candidates that did choose to be here tonight, that we know all of us up here that this is not an easy position. And so we, I personally, speaking for myself, want to let you know how much I appreciate that you are here this evening. So any other board comments?
Yes, I would hope Mr. Solicitor, that the 10-minute is, excuse me, the 10 minutes is not a hard 10 minutes. If there's ongoing discussion, I would hope there's latitude if it goes beyond 10 minutes until the discussion is ended.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, the only problem with
Thank
that
you.
is then does one candidate get 10 minutes and another gets 20?
No, I think we will look at the 10 minutes as the guidepost. Obviously, if we find ourselves going way far afield of that, then we probably want to wrap it up. But certainly it's not, once the 10 minutes hits, we say thank you. We would certainly allow that flexibility.
Okay. Are there any other board questions or comments before we begin the interview process?
Have we determined the order, or is the order as listed?
We did. The candidates, when they, and that's a good point. Thank you, Mrs. Zasowski. The candidates, as they came in, selected from the hat, numbers 1 through 5, and the order in which they will be interviewed. So the first one will be Ms. Michelle Harden. The second will be Ms. Heather McFarland. The third, Mr. Jonathan Cooper. The fourth, Mrs. Jillian Anoya. And the fifth is Ms. Jennifer Motzer. Right. All right, okay,
Thank you.
all right. So if there's something else at this time, we would ask that the candidates, with the exception of our first one, Ms. Harden, would go with Mrs. Crew, who's over there. Hi, Ms. Harden, you may go ahead and approach the seat there. Yes. And you will see that there's a button on the microphone that you can press to talk. All right, and Mr. Fitzgerald will be moderating tonight, or is that the right term? I'm
Sure, for this evening, sure.
asking our questions.
Sure.
Thank you.
I would petition the board. Any objections if the candidates introduce themselves? Does the board have any objection to that? Okay,
No, we have no objection to
instead
that.
of just jumping right in
Sure.
and, yeah, get comfortable.
Then why don't we start with that, and then I'll go into the process. So Ms. Harden, for the board and based on Mr. Jackson's recommendation, can you introduce yourself for the 9 members of the board?
Sure. So as you know, I'm Michelle Harden. I moved here in 2018 to the Pennsylvania area from North Carolina. So I'm not originally from Pennsylvania. but I did fall in love with Royersford and I did fall in love with Springford. So I was very happy to officially move into the area in 2020. Educationally, I have a bachelor's of science from Georgia State University in biology and a minor in chemistry. And then my master's is in forensic science, specifically in forensic molecular biology from George Washington University. Currently, my career is as a senior associate scientist. I work at Janssen Pharmaceuticals, so J&J in Malvern. And my daughter is a rising second grader at Brook Elementary, and I have a wonderful husband who is here supporting me. So just a little bit about me.
Okay, so this evening I'm going to ask a series of questions on behalf of the board. The process would be that I'm going to ask a question, and then we would ask for your response. After you respond to a given question, at that point, there would be an opportunity for board members to ask follow-ups surrounding the question and your response. And we'll do that for the 3 questions that are being posed to all of the candidates this evening. The first question this evening is, why are you interested in serving on the school board in Springford?
So this does hold kind of a special place in my heart because I said my daughter does go to school here. Also because my history is in service. So prior to moving to Pennsylvania, I was more in a service-oriented career. So this is kind of a move for me to come back to that. So I also think it's important to work together so that adopting in the policies of the education of our students and those on the campus. It's not only my daughter, but it's my neighbors' children's, her friends. So I think this is an important position, not one to be taken lightly. So that's why I put in for it. I do have a passion for service, so.
But board members are certainly, this would be a time to ask any follow-ups to that question.
Prior to having this opportunity to serve on the school board, were you thinking about running anytime in the future, or is this a one-off, or?
No, so in all honesty, this is something that I tell my husband all the time. Actually, I really should throw my hat or my name in there. But I will be honest, going out for an election kind of makes me nervous. So this was a way for me to do this without having to go into the deep end. It's like you wade in first and get the opportunity to do it. So this is really unique. And that's why I was like, wow, this would be a good way to enter this.
Really, this is the deep end.
I'm sorry.
This is the deep end, sitting up here. Because when you go out, as you mentioned, everyone's friendly. When you sit up here, it's a different dynamics. So, okay, thank you.
That's a good point.
Just really quickly, your daughter's in 6th grade, or rising
Second. Yeah.
Okay, so in her time here, have you been involved in the school at all with her or her activities?
So prior to COVID, and before her entering, I was the classroom mom, so to say, but since COVID, I haven't been able to return. I have asked to volunteer on a couple of different things, but I think they went with students instead. So, yeah.
You talked about your history or your previous work in service. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Right. So previously I was more in a law enforcement profession. So I did not wear a badge as per se, but I served in that way. So I was a crime scene investigator and I worked alongside many law enforcement in doing their work. I also ran a fusion center. So that's the other reason this kind of lends to my background. We had to deal with a lot with the General Assembly, with the state procedures and how they fused with law enforcement and what we were able to distribute, and also in creating policies alongside DHS and so forth. And then I was a forensic scientist for the state. So.
Any other board questions? Mr. Schaefer?
So thank you. Takes a lot of credit. Sit up there. So have you watched some of the board meetings?
I have.
Okay, so you have a general sense of the personalities up here. I'm just curious how you feel your addition around this table would fill a void.
So
And that kind of leads to question 2, actually, too, I think. Sounds true.
It is a raised question
With
too.
all due respect, how does that lead to, why was mine?
No,
Okay.
it's not.
Well, let's do question 2 and we'll go from there. What qualities, skills, and experience would you bring to the board?
So I think I already touched on one of them, which is the ability to kind of understand more complicated procedures that would come from a legislative background. But I think I tend to be a pretty calm personality and I'm quite the active listener, which I think is what is a component really needed to sit where you're sitting. Not only that, but you need to be able to bridge what we need to do, what is given to us by policy, and then take on what is being asked of us over community. So to answer the previous question, I think I bring balance. I bring, openness. So I believe in looking at all perspectives. Being a scientist, I'm very analytical, I'm very data driven. So that's the component I think I can bring and the experience I can bring.
Thank you for answering that question.
You do understand that the board is 9 individuals.
Yes.
There's no team, there's no party, there's no group. Everybody represents themselves.
Theoretically.
Yeah. So would you be comfortable with that being an individual versus being on team B or team A?
So I would answer that this way. One, we are all individuals, but we are a team in what we were supposed to bring to the table as far as a board. So as an individual, I would stand alone in what my convictions are and what I see is before me as far as the decision I need to make. I don't know if that's answering your question, but aside from that, I do see it as there's a team component. So it's twofold for me. So I don't think I have an issue standing alone as an individual, but I do know when I need to be a team member and there will be compromises that have to be made.
You mentioned earlier some legislative experience. Could you expand on that?
So when I worked as a senior crime analyst and I was in charge of the Fusion Center, we worked quite commonly with dealing with certain government agencies, so like DHS and so forth. And we would have to sit and listen and deal with what their policies and procedures were. I also was writing, I was trying to compose a way for us to be kind of enveloped into the state itself. So in that understanding of policies and procedures, also in general, most of the things I've had to do with law enforcement are all dictated by statutes, state statutes. And so when I were to go and do any of my testing, that was highly regulated. And not furthermore, when I would be in court testifying. So I understand all those kind of like legal, the jargon, the policy, the procedures, the loopholes, the no loopholes, those kind of things.
Within that legislative process, were there any involvements when you met with them regarding budgets? And I'm assuming your department was state funded?
We were state funded. So actually, no, let me take a step back. The Fusion Center itself was funded by a grant. So that was what I was trying to do. I was trying to get the state to take us on as an actual legitimate fusion center. And so there was a proposal for a budget that I did have to create before that proposal went through. Unfortunately, they've decided that Department of Homeland Security only wanted one fusion center per state. So ours was ultimately shut down.
Dr. Wright, we have about another minute, so I'd like to at least pose the final question. And that would be, how have you involved yourself in the Springford area school district community to prepare yourself to be a contributing member of the school board?
So that is a good question, and it is one that I was I have less experience with. So the most that I have involved myself in the community is through my daughter's school at Brook Elementary, and joining in on the events that they have, and if they have the volunteer opportunities to try to put in my name to volunteer, whether I'm chosen or not. So that really is the extent of what I have done. So I probably lack there.
Any follow-up on that question?
I guess I want clarification. When you mentioned your education, did you say you had a doctorate?
No, I'm sorry, I just have a master's.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
It's okay. One should never say, I just have a master's, in my opinion, by the way.
It's a good point. I agree with you. It's not an easy one.
If there are no follow-up questions.
Just
Yes.
one quick one.
Sure.
You referenced that you do have that some, at least a limited exposure to budget experience, right? With the position that you have.
Right.
And what about direct board experience? Maybe not a school board, but any kind of board experience working with others like that? Any capacity, like a Y board or anything in a different state even?
So we did hold a board. We did have a board for the Fusion Center, and who ran it was one of the chief of police in the area, and I was a position in there as well. And then the rest of the board members were also other sheriffs and police chiefs as well. And so basically what we would do is we would discuss what was going on in the Fusion Center and how to propel it forward, how to bring on more membership. So going out to other sheriff's department and police departments and telling them the purpose of the Fusion Center and the importance of the, linking criminal aspects together. So
All right, thank you.
yeah, no problem.
I have one tiny little question.
Sure.
Are you saying Fusion Center or
I-
Infusion? And then and can you explain what that is?
Right, so it's Fusion. So a Fusion Center is basically what we do is we would be assigned a district. So I was the Eastern District of North Carolina, and we looked at all the crime that was occurring throughout all the police departments and sheriff's departments, and we would try to make links. So that's the fusion part. And then we would work in combination with state and federal governments, like I said. So if we started to see that there was a link that maybe was extending into another jurisdiction, we would provide that information and try to correlate them.
Awesome, thank you.
So you work with the state and the feds?
I work, so two different
Work
things.
with.
Oh, with, yes.
All right, thank you.
Sorry.
Any other board questions? Nope.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Harden.
All right, thank you. You guys have a nice.
Hello. Hello, everyone.
Hi, Ms. McFarland. My name is Mark Fitzgerald. The board has a series of 3 questions that they would like you to answer this evening. But before we start that, we were hoping you could just introduce yourself to the board first.
Certainly. My name is Heather McFarland, a resident of Spring City Borough since 2013. And I have 1 child currently in the district. I have 2 daughters.
So I'm going to ask you the series of 3 questions, and certainly we would like your response to the questions. What has occurred, at least during our first interview, is that it could result in some follow-up questions by members of the board.
Okay.
So we will begin with question 1, and that is, why are you interested in serving on this school board?
I'm interested in serving on the school board primarily Service has always been a large part of my family's values. And at the moment, I was trying to find a way in which I could be most helpful to my community. I formerly served as the HSA treasurer on the Spring City Elementary School board and enjoyed that position, working with the community, which of course, as you know, is a very small elementary school. So knowing all of the families and the students and the teachers, and helping make that experience as best as possible was something that I really enjoyed being a part of and felt a great sense of responsibility for, as these were my neighbors and my own child at the school. So I'm looking forward to continuing in that way.
Hi. Prior to this opportunity
Yes.
of being on the school board, did you ever consider running for school board, or have you considered running for school board, or are you considering running for school board?
I have. It's something that I felt like I wanted to be a longer standing member of the community before I would participate in that way. I felt that that was most fair, that I would understand community concerns and do that. I've volunteered in a number of other capacities, both at St. Joe's Parish as an educator and then formerly in Montgomery County as well, both with the schools in Montgomery County, North Penn School District, and with my religious group there.
Have you attended any school board meetings on Zoom or
I
in
have
person?
in Zoom.
In
Yes.
Zoom. In person?
In person, no.
Okay, thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other school board members with questions, follow-up? Let me continue.
Okay, question number 2, Ms. McFarland. What qualities, skills, and experience would you bring to the school board?
I feel that my experience as an ethnographer, which is a form of cultural anthropology in which you work directly with a community and gain trust through getting to know community members, and being allowed to participate in community-specific activities at the permission of those community members. Number one, sort of uniquely positions me to join the school board and help, because I am truly interested in all of the members' positions of the community. I'm interested in all sides of the story. And I think gaining trust of people as well as transparency is something that is very important to me. I do that in my daily work as a manager. I've worked in luxury retail in Montgomery County. And so many of my clients I've known for almost 20 years at this point, and their family members and their colleagues and things like that. So that level of trust and participation is something that I also would bring to the position of school board member. And I think as well, my ties with education. I worked as a museum educator for many years, both in Buffalo, New York, at the Buffalo Museum of Science, as well as the New York State Museum. As an educator, I was the youngest person hired by the New York State Museum when I was in college there. So academics and education are something that are incredibly important to my family. I'm a naturally curious person, and so I enjoy delving into learning things and examining challenges and applying those that skill to any decisions that are at hand.
You mentioned the word transparency.
Yes.
Is there something you think the board's not being transparent about?
No, not at all. I think the board's incredibly transparent. I love the fact that the meetings are available on Zoom and that there's the participation guidelines, those I believe. Obviously, I'm much more novice than you at this, but I think those are what are considered hallmarks of what boards are encouraged to do currently in terms of being transparent to communities and making themselves available to engage with the community and ultimately of the board's success.
Thank you. Have you attended via Zoom or in person any committee meetings of the school board?
Yes.
And which ones struck your
During the-
fancy?
I'm sorry?
Which ones struck your fancy?
I was, of course, engaged during the pandemic as we were trying to determine what was going on. So I found that to be a way to stay engaged in what was happening within the school district. So that was one that was of interest, of course, you know, the issues that faced during that time. And I think as, you know, as the person who's attending on Zoom, I believe it was Jeff mentioned, being able to understand what the board is facing in terms of decisions and how the board makes decisions, I viewed in that way.
Just a follow-up clarification question. I was asking what committee meetings have you attended, not school board meetings, committee meetings. Have you attended?
I have not attended specific committee meetings. My apologies.
Okay, no worries.
Any budgetary or board experience specifically in your background, not even maybe related to school, or it could be a school?
Well, in my position professionally, I am entrusted to manage the fiscal interests of the companies that I represent. So currently I'm managing a $1 million company. I have managed up to $8 million. And the staff, as well as the resources that go into those businesses and those doors. So fiscal management is my everyday.
And the board, any board experience?
My board experience is only with the Home and School Board, where I was the treasurer at Spring City.
Any other board questions?
Okay, question 3. How have you involved yourself in the Springford Area School District community to prepare yourself to be a contributing member of this board?
Definitely. That's something that I took seriously. And as I was a newcomer to the community, what is it going on, 2013, so 10 years, almost 9 years. I first wanted to get to know everybody. And so when I joined Springfield Elementary, I got to know the community members, the teachers, and the administrators there, as well as getting to know my neighbors, which we have a pretty active block, although that certainly expands to the rest of the borough. And I frequently meet all my neighbors and people who've lived there for many years and grew up within the district. So I did that first, and then became increasingly involved at school, as well as paying attention to, just the overall sort of trends and interests and considerations that the district has. And so that's what I've done to prepare.
Are there any particular issues that you're passionate about?
I'm very passionate about equity. I feel that that's something that, having worked at an inner city museum and assisting many students who participated in an after-school program who were public school students, I saw how impactful active boards could be in a student's well-being and ultimately in their family's success and the community's success. It really struck me, and it was on an individual basis with students that I was able to see that happen. And of course, through the work of the nonprofit, the museum that I worked at. I feel passionate about educators being free to do their jobs, and that boards, obviously, and superintendents are so necessary to have a great relationship working together in order for students to receive the education that they deserve, and educators to be free to do what they need to do. So those two things are very passionate to me. My father ended his career as a public educator. He worked in the chemical industry as an analytical chemist for many years, but I think the highlight of his career was serving as a public educator. And through that, again, working at magnet schools in Philadelphia, as well as other public schools, and the conversations that we had about it, and how different schools functioned in different ways, and how intrinsic boards were and superintendents were in clearing the way for students to become amazing successes, sometimes at great odds to what they were already facing. So I feel strongly about that. I think it's amazing. Both my children in public school. We're a real academic family. We believe strongly in education, and I believe strongly in public schools.
You said you have one in district?
I have one in district who's 10, and then my other daughter is 22, who's attending grad school. She was at North Penn.
Any other board questions?
Yes, Dr. Wright, you mentioned the word equity. Being in the inner city schools, should equity also be applicable to the suburban schools?
I think this is something that faces all school boards as communities are diverse. And obviously, as a community, we share certain communal identities, but there certainly are people of every different background and resource. And I think that school boards have a very important role in ensuring that that continues regardless of where that school board is or how many students they represent.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
Any other board questions?
Okay, Ms. McFarland, unless there's another question,
I'm sorry, what? Oh,
I don't think then there is. Thank you.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thanks for your time.
thank you very much.
Hi, Mr. Cooper. My name is Mark Fitzgerald. I've been asked by the board to ask you a series of questions, three, with regard to your application to be a member of the board. But before we get to that, the board, and this has been asked of the first two applicants, if you could just introduce yourself generally to the board, and then we'll get to the questions.
Absolutely. My name is Jonathan Cooper, 48 years old, so meet the minimum age requirement. Been a resident of town for 10 years. I have a daughter who attends Brook Elementary School entering the 4th grade. I just want to thank you for the time tonight. As my professional career, as you see from my letter of intent and the accompanying resume, went to school for journalism, practiced as a trained journalist for over 20 years, became a member of the executive team at a media organization before transitioning to a new career as a marketer. I have experience as an entrepreneur, starting my own consultancy and launching a business. And this is an opportunity to just give more to the community, an opportunity to participate in the ongoing improvement of the education in town, and a way to also just continue to pay back the community that has given so much to our family.
So, Mr. Cooper, I will ask you three questions. Sure. After each question and your response, there has been some follow-up by members of the board. The first question is, why are you interested in serving on the Springford School Board?
Sure. Why am I interested in serving on the board? I think it really stems from being involved in the community, being a participant in a place you call home, and being active and not waiting for others to do the work, not waiting for others to lead. A number of years ago, had the opportunity of volunteering as my daughter joined Brook Elementary and the Home and School Association, and have since become a member of a couple of their leading fundraising efforts over the last 2 years. And it's rewarding, not just because of the connections that I make and people I've met through the community, but it's also an example for my daughter. It's an example for her to see the impact that you can have in your community to participate and to affect change. I think in the letter that I sent in when I offered my interest, one of the mentions that I made was, for those of you who are familiar with downtown color bot or book bot. These are some upcycled newspaper vending boxes that my daughter and I recrafted over the last couple of years and put into town. And it's just a small way, again, of showing ways that you can make impact in the community. But why I want to participate here, I want to work along people who are like-minded in terms of driving education forward for our community. I want to support our teachers, but mostly I want to support our families and our students.
Any board follow-up questions?
I'm a scooper. You said like-minded. Could you, what does that really mean? Like-minded?
Sure. Mr. Jackson, like-minded in terms of people who are interested in serving the community, serving the educational improvement of our community, ensuring that the vision of the board and the vision of the district are met.
Thank you.
With that in mind, had you ever considered running for the board, or is this, I don't want to say is this a new thought, but is this new to you, the idea of being part of this, or had you thought about that before? Is your intention to run later? Or did it just, like, how did
I come to be here today?
How'd you get here? Yes.
I drove. No, how I came to be here today, during the last election cycle, I had given it thought and had done some looking, and I think I allowed myself to allow life to say it wasn't the right time. And over the last couple of years, I realized that there is never a quote right time. You have to make the time. You have to make that commitment. And in conversations with family and with friends, neighbors, colleagues, I made the decision that this is the right time. This is an opportunity. And should I not be selected, I will continue to be active and vocal and participate. But I hope that there is an opportunity to serve.
And should selected or not selected? Thoughts on the upcoming election, consideration for that?
Yes, I would look to pursue to continue should voters have me in 2023, which I'll admit is an odd thing to say because campaigning is not something that I have experience in. As a journalist, I covered many campaigns, but have never been on that side of the process.
It's fun.
Mr. Cooper, when we all campaigned, it was our first time also. So we all started the same in the beginning. As far as interest in school board, do you have a basic understanding of what's required of a school board member? It's high level.
Yes, high level. Yes, in terms of helping with subcommittees or participating in subcommittees regarding extracurricular, curriculum, budget, finance. Yes.
Time.
In terms of time, I have had conversations with a couple members of the board to ask what the time commitment is, and it varies. And it's my understanding that it would be the equivalent of, not quite a part-time job, but more. So.
Do you also understand if you're selected to the board, your family becomes a part of that board?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
Who did you have conversations with on the board?
I've asked Erica what the time commitment is, and I've asked Abby what the time commitment is.
Did you watch any of our meetings during COVID? Because that time commitment really took a jump.
Yes.
During that time.
Yes, I recognize that, and sat in on a couple of them and saw them go well past established hours into the early morning hours.
Let's go to question 2 for time keeping purposes. What qualities, skills, and experience would you bring to the board?
Sure. Quality, skills, and experience. So part of my career for the news organization was working as director of communication for 10,000 people across more than 70 locations across the United States. And that's a pretty big constituency. So working to understand the interests and needs of those stakeholders and bring them back to leadership, that was part of what my day-to-day was for more than 3 years. In my current role, I work with multiple stakeholders, people of varied interests, and look to broker alignment and community. So try to figuring ways to build solutions and build consensus.
Are there any follow-ups to that question?
specific budget or board experience?
Not board experience. I did work for, as it says on my resume, a liaison for our mergers and acquisition team when I worked at the media organization. So budget negotiations, finance experience, yes, but not board experience.
Did that budget negotiations involve union labor?
It did.
Question 3, how have you involved yourself in the Springford area school district community to prepare yourself to be a contributing member to this board?
Sure. So as mentioned, since my daughter enrolled in Brook Elementary, I've been active in home and school. So whether it's grassroots efforts in terms of fundraising or it's volunteer time within that organization, supporting those efforts, volunteer within the classroom as well. And then, participating in terms of just watching the board meetings from afar, reading minutes, staying apprised, and reviewing budgets when they are available.
Are there any particular initiatives that you would like to see brought to the board, like future thinking ideas?
Yeah. I think I would want to be grounded in the realities facing the board before I brought some of those forward. So that, yes, but it's interesting because Mr. Jackson, you mentioned that when you become a member of the board, your whole family becomes a member of the board. I've already received a number of solicited or unsolicited suggestions from my soon-to-be 4th grader. One is something about chicken nuggets, so we'll make sure to research that before it is brought to the board. But it did actually pique an idea of spending some time talking directly to some of the students at different levels to understand what they face on a daily, and soliciting some additional feedback from the teachers, because in the discussions with home and school, some of the things that have surfaced look at translation services for non-English language students, for academic support as well as family support. And as a parent of a Brook student, that is something that is near and dear to that school and to that student body. There's also some emotional support, I think, that is necessary for our students, particularly after the last couple of years, and some of the challenges that we faced with schooling in this current climate.
Any other questions from the board? Mr. Schaefer?
Thank you, Dr. Have you attended any school board committee meetings?
I've not attended school board committee meetings in the past, only these meetings via Zoom.
Any other board questions?
Okay, Mr. Cooper, thank you very much.
Thank you for the time. Bye-bye.
You guys tired of hearing us talk yet?
Ms. Anoya, my name is Mark Fitzgerald. I'm going to ask you a series of 3 questions that will be asked of all candidates this evening. But the board has asked each candidate before we start that process to simply introduce themselves to the board and to the community.
Oh, okay, great. My name is Jill Anoya. I have been living in the Springford area since my now 14-year-old was a couple days old. I live in Limerick. And I'm the president of a nonprofit organization, Simply Positive Kids, that runs here in the community.
So I'm going to ask 3 questions, and what has occurred for the previous 3 individuals is there typically are follow-up questions by members of the board after your response to the questions. Question 1, why are you interested in serving on the school board?
I'm interested in serving because I think that it's our duty to serve where we can. I believe in the strength of community. I believe in giving back where you live. It's something that I've tried really hard to not only ingrain in my children, but pass on to other kids that we've worked with through my nonprofit. And it just came at a time in my life personally where I was ready for the next step and getting into some other ways that I could serve. And I thought that this would be a good way to do that.
Yeah, board follow-up questions?
Is this, I think, where there was some, just maybe asking if you've attended any of our board meetings or as such, or?
I haven't. Without getting too far into things, I spent a significant time at home with my husband who was terminally ill. We lost him 18 months ago, and I'm just now kind of getting my feet back into things. I had a senior, he graduated, and my focus was really on making sure that he was where he needed to be after everything that we had been through. And now that he's all but packed and counting down the minutes until he leaves me, I'm ready to kind of really get into things and see how I can help and advocate and make some change where it's needed, if it's needed.
The second question.
I have a question. I think it goes here. Where I believe Mrs. Zowski previously asked, are you interested in continuing in 2023, perhaps, like running for the position after the appointment is over?
Yes, I would absolutely have interest in that. I don't know that you can come into any organization and really make an impact or a difference in such a short time. So yes, that would be my plan.
I also wanted to let Mr. Schaefer know that I did talk to Ms. Anoya as well. She reached out to me with questions about board commitment.
Just a follow-up question. So if you were to run, how would you plan on campaigning?
Oh.
You opened the door when
What's
you
the matter?
started talking about campaigning.
No, I haven't, honest to God, I haven't thought about it yet. I really haven't even, no, okay, no, I was just trying to understand, because it hadn't been something that I really had thought into and developed a plan for yet.
Okay, question 2. What qualities, skills, and experience would you bring to the board?
I'm a mother with kids in the district, with what I consider to be deep roots and relationships in this community. I've grown our nonprofit from 35 kids in 2015 who go out, they go out and participate in community change and random acts of kindness and things of that nature. And we've grown that to over 800 kids when we're really running that at full speed. The majority of them Springford students. I feel like I am the kind of person who likes to hear every side of an argument. I don't know everything. And if there's a place that I can learn something because somebody is speaking to me about something that I hadn't considered, or they have a different viewpoint, then let me learn, let me understand. I don't think that as a society, we have a ton of that. So I feel a little unique in that way. I really, really, in my heart, believe that we should each come to the table every day with a heart and a mindset to serve. And I feel like right now in my life, this is the good time for me to do that.
You mentioned a nonprofit.
Yes, sir.
And it's expanding, or it has expanded. How would you balance the needs of Simply Positive Kids and the needs of the school board?
I have always kept that running separate from anything that the school has run, and I would intend to keep it that way. I also do that with a group. It is not just me. It would be a disaster if it was just me. There's too much going on and too many working parts and too many ways to get things out. I have a support system who I know would, because they've done it before. Like I said, my life was on pause for 4 years, a real hard pause. And they kept it up and they ran it without me. And I know that if there became some kind of conflict, I don't believe that there would be. I can't see how there would, but if there were, I know that group of ladies would step up and have my back in that way and make sure that it ran so that I could focus on my duties here.
Have there been any interactions between Springford and your organization?
I have dealt with Aaron Crew a little bit. But that wasn't anything too specific. And it was years ago, we had talked about trying to kind of put something together. But the more we talked about it, the more we decided we wanted to keep it separate, because we are a group that's completely inclusive. We have kids from PV and Phoenixville and Methacton and all over the place. We didn't want it to be something where someone felt they couldn't participate because it was strictly a Springford event. I also am one of the people who started the Be Kind Ella Day that the school has picked up. And we do work with the school with that, but that's one day, September 20th, that the school kind of puts out for the kids to wear blue in honor of Ella Smith, who passed away from cancer a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
Of course.
So budgetary board experience?
I've run some of the budget from the nonprofit standpoint. I do have a treasurer who takes care of most of that, but I'm involved in the decisions about where we're spending money and where the money goes, how are we going to raise money. And I'm the president of that there, but other than that, that's it. I've just been a mom trying to serve people.
So that's budget. Is that your?
Yes, I've had my hands in it. It is not, I was not the treasurer by any
Right.
means, but yes, I've had my hand in that, yes.
So that would be your focus on the budget, but what about board experience? Do you have board experience at all anywhere in any other
No.
organization?
Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Are there any particular initiatives that you're interested that the board pursues or things that you're passionate about?
I would really like to be involved in making sure that school is a safe place. Having kids the age I do, again, one just graduated and one is 14, and you hear things, you know, when you talk to your kids, I advise doing it in the car. That's when they're the chattiest. You learn things and you hear about things that go on. And I just think that if there's any way that I can be involved in an extracurricular type of committee or a place where kids can find a safe place to be, I would like to be a part of that.
You mentioned safe space. Has it been something that you felt the need to come to the school board about?
No. And only because a lot of times it's been stories I'm hearing from my kids about other kids. It's not something that has affected my children directly where I can come here and say, I know firsthand that this happened or that this went down or whatever this situation is. If it was my children, there are times that I would have been here. But again, I didn't feel at that time, having it only been secondhand information and not having it be a parent that I have a relationship with, that it was a place for me to do that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, we still have a last question. How have you involved yourself in the Springford area school district community to prepare yourself to be a contributing member of this board?
Hopefully I went over that a little bit in my previous answers. But just to reiterate, I really do think that if you, it sounds so cliche and I'm rolling my eyes as I say it, but if you can give where you live, you should do that. And I've done it. There have been families in this district who didn't have food and we got them food. There was a child in this district recently who's had a family situation come up and we came and raised money and helped him immediately with keeping it quiet. We've adopted families through Springford at Christmas to make sure that those kids have, and we've done it discreetly as well. And I'm not saying that we haven't made it known that we've done it. I just mean, you're not going to get the names of those people from us. It's not about the show for me. It's not about getting the credit. I don't need that. But if I can lay my head down at night and know that I made things a little bit better for somebody, then I'm good. That's all I need.
Are there any follow-up questions to the last question?
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think we need to be clear on if a question is asked and something is open up based on that question. The question that Mr. Schaefer asked was based on the question coming from that side of the table regarding campaigning. So I think we have to understand if that question comes up, if someone asks a question, that door is open. And I don't think he crossed the line by asking that question, just from my perspective.
While we're at it, I got frowny looks from almost everyone. So what was the problem with the question?
Because it seemed very political and seemed to be not appropriate.
Seemed very political?
Yes.
You have to.
Mr.
I
Mullins, we have
felt that it was
another
very
candidate in here.
inappropriate.
Did we want
Thank you for
to ask that a
answering.
candidate to be removed? Did you want to continue?
Can we actually ask the candidate to step out for a moment? The board,
Thank you. Apologize.
Yes.
I mean, to answer your question, if you think that I made a frowny face, I don't know that I did. I just feel as though with the, I did. If we're trying to, we have these questions to kind of make sure that the candidates are all having a similar experience. So I know I'm speaking about what my perception is and perhaps if I made a face or whatever. So I think that when we're asking clarifying questions, give me a little bit more about how you served or what your passions are or what initiatives you'd like to see where it's specific to that question. Some of the questions that have come up, and not just by you, seem like a completely different question to me. So that's, but
I'll just
it's not my show.
Yeah, I mean, just to give my perspective, I'm going to go back to the statement that was issued by the district that this position is for the remainder of Ms. Sullivan's term, which is through December 2023. And so while I would love to find a candidate that says, yes, I'm going to commit, to me, I believe that is irrelevant given the requirements of the position at this point. And to go one step further and ask them what their campaign strategy would be, should they choose, I just don't think is pertinent to the requirements that were sent out at this point. Thank you.
Well, if we're gonna air things, I have a question about at least two of these people, two of the five had contacted you, Abby. I mean, I don't know that we should be having any discussions with any
Has
potential.
that been historically how it's been done? If a community
I
member
thought we
reaches
had it-
out and
I thought-
asks a question about basic things,
Well,
because it's not my understanding that that's the way that it's
when
been
was it
done.
that they contacted you? Did they contact you
Prior to applying.
prior to applying? So
Yeah.
what, okay, so I mean,
I find it fascinating that more people didn't reach out asking questions, honestly.
So to be fair, I had several people ask prior to the deadline. to
I don't
find
know
out
that
what
I
the
have a problem with,
qualifications.
I don't know if I have a problem with prior to then, but I didn't know that, right? All I knew is that two of them at least had reached out to you. And could that have been after the deadline to try to get more information or find out the questions, be better prepared? I just think that we're trying to do it on a playing field to have it fair for all of the candidates.
Well, that's region, they probably looked at, those are the Region 3 representatives.
I mean, everybody except,
Yeah, but once you get on the board, I think we're done with whether you're Region 1. I don't look at Maggie and say, oh, you're that region. I'm not gonna talk to you about that.
The perception is out there that you represent your region.
I don't know. We've
And-
said it over and over here. that
I know, but I'm
Once
just
you're
telling
here,
you,
it's
it's
the
pretty
whole
clear
community.
because somebody came specifically to me to say, hey, I'm interested in this. And I had to tell him you're in the wrong region. He's like, oh, well, you're my representative. And I had to explain to him how that worked.
Yeah,
So I do think some
I really
very,
like to bury that stereotype because
well, we're not going to do that today.
Well,
No.
Mrs. Zazeski, I do agree with you. I do think that people reached out to Abby and me because this is specifically in Region 3. And as we've heard from quite a few people, there are connections at Brook Elementary where we have students. So for someone to want to consider applying and say, what's the time commitment? How much time do you spend on the board? I don't see that as a conflict of interest.
I spoke with Diane Sullivan when I was considering running.
But to continue though,
How'd that
even
work
if this
out?
was not in Region 3, I would agree with you. I would do the same for anyone who asked me in Region 2 or 1, because this is us serving the district
as a whole, right?
as a whole.
And I thank you for clarifying that it was prior to the application.
Oh, I got some frowny faces from the other side of the table as well when it came up, so I thought that I would
Dr. Wright,
just be transparent.
Might I say, we do have one, we can certainly continue this conversation, but let's get to our last applicant and then we can get to board discussion.
Right, I think we'd like to get that last applicant and then we will have time for discussion after that. So we can go ahead and bring the last applicant in.
Just for the record, there's no time limit on this discussion. None.
I don't think you have a sunset provision in your policy.
That's right. That's right.
I had coffee.
I'll need it.
While we're waiting, I think it makes a lot of sense to contact board members. So whether it was before or after, I was just curious because I've got 10 years experience. Nobody contacted me. Maybe it's me. I don't know.
You're Region 2 with me, Dave.
For a time to.
And we didn't give you a frowny face, okay?
Sorry about that. Hi.
No problem.
Okay. Hi, Dr. Motzer.
Hello,
How are you?
I'm doing well. It's nice to see you.
Now you see what I do for a living.
You too.
Dr. Motzer taught my daughter in 6th grade last year, so, yep.
Lovely child.
Dr. Motzer, this evening, the board is asking me to ask a series of 3 questions to each candidate applicant. But before each candidate was asked these series of questions, we've asked that the applicant provide us a background of who you are.
Sure. My name is Dr. Jennifer Motzer. I have been a resident of the Springford School District for well over 20 years. Right now, I live with my husband and children in Linfield.
We love our neighborhood. I am a lifetime educator. I have devoted my adult life to public education. I have served my district in various roles, starting as a first grade teacher. I've been a sixth grade teacher, a seventh grade teacher, and eighth grade teacher. I've been a reading specialist. I have been a coach. I have also been an administrator in our district office working with curriculum and instruction, which is basically what leads me here to you today. I saw a need in my community and I just wanted to offer basically my background to ask the questions with you to really muddle through some of those really difficult situations that we're all dealing with in public education.
So I'm going to ask the questions, and then there's generally been some follow-up by board members. First question, and you're starting down this path. Why are you interested in serving on the board?
So I've found throughout life that service finds me. There's usually an opportunity that presents itself, and I fill that need. You know, looking historically back when my husband and I first moved into our house, we did not have any children. We joined a church right up the road, and we attended a meeting looking for volunteers for our youth group. And we left that meeting being in charge of the youth group. And we were the youth group directors for our church for 5 or 6 years until we had children. I told our priest that I really could no longer serve in that capacity anymore. I was a little busy. And I remember after church the one day having 2 infant carriers on my arms saying goodbye. And he said, you know, now that you're on maternity leave, you have some extra time on your hands. How would you like to schedule all of our readers and our servers and all of the people at church? And I looked down at these 2 infant babies and I said, okay, sure. So then for 5 or 6 years, I served my church in that capacity. I had basically 300 people that I was scheduling, probably 50 every weekend. And that was just an opportunity that found me that I really ended up truly enjoying. So basically throughout life, those opportunities find me, and I saw just an opportunity where I can again serve my community along with all of you in this very difficult position, but apparently rewarding because you're all here on this, you know, late in July.
There are follow-up questions to that question.
Yes, you just mentioned being on the board is a difficult decision. What, a difficult position? Why is that? Why do you think it's difficult?
From my perspective, being a public educator for 24 years, you have some really important decisions that you make. The children that attend these schools, the teachers, the staff really depend on your decisions. We have taxpayers that depend upon your decisions. So it's an important job. And I would imagine that there are times where there are competing opinions that would put you in a position where you would have to make a decision, a difficult decision. So that's why I could imagine watching these board meetings over the past 24 years, that at times it could be difficult for you have to make that decision where there's possibly lots of correct answers or maybe no correct answers, but you still need to make a decision.
Are you able to make these quote unquote difficult decisions if needed?
Luckily, there are 9 people on a board that work collaboratively to make that decision. Typically, what helps me make those difficult decisions is looking at information from various perspectives. I love data. I love diving deep into data, not only looking at the big numbers, you know, this many people felt this way, this many people felt this way, but I like to look deeply. Who was surveyed? How were they surveyed? Whose voices are heard? Whose voices are possibly not heard in this data? What other questions do we need to ask as a result of this information that we're being presented with? So yes, I can make those difficult decisions, but not based on opinion, but based on information, qualitative, quantitative, and a collaborative approach.
But the board consists of 9 individuals. Would you be able to make a decision that it's 1 against 8, you against 8? Or would, because I'm hearing you want to work with everybody and sing kumbaya. I'm just wondering, would you be able to make a decision where you stood on the island by yourself?
Absolutely. Personally, I think it's better when people do collaborate, not necessarily always agreeing, but collaborate and ask the questions and have that discussion so that we can hear everyone's opinions. But yes, absolutely. I've been told by my colleagues that I'm a fierce advocate for children. They use the word fierce. So if I had an opinion that was opposed, I would say it in a kind and respectful way. But yes, I absolutely would be able to vote against all of you if need be.
Okay. Question 2. What qualities, skills, and experience would you bring to the board?
Okay, so I mentioned before the various positions that I've held as an educator. The skills that come along with that run pretty deep. I am at my core a learner. I like to learn. I like to read. I like to investigate. I like to talk to people. I also bring with me many years of providing professional development to adults and understanding how adults work together. I understand how we can move together as a cohesive piece. Again, not to always agree with one another, but to work for the common good, which I believe all of you are here to do. You're here for a common purpose. So I do bring some skills that I've learned through the years to work with you. I have served again in my district and I understand the federal programs and finances. I was responsible for the federal programs for many years in my district when I was an administrator. I've observed teachers. I've been the teacher being observed. I've taught through a pandemic. I worked with children of all ages. So I feel like I have the piece that would be able to support you when you're making those educationally based decisions. I've also lived here for many years. I paid those tax bills for many years. So I understand the decisions that need to be made when you're looking at how much needs to be spent versus the benefits for those expenditures.
Being a school board member involves more than curriculum.
Yes.
We have labor unions. We have big budgets that we have to balance. We have engineering of our buildings. I mean, so it's much broader than, so can you speak to any of that, any experience with any of that? The other components of the district other than curriculum?
Sure. So as I mentioned before, I was responsible for all of the federal programming in our district, which meant I completed the grants. I prepared the budgets. I looked at the expenditures. I helped with programming. So that hundreds of thousands of dollars went through my desk for multiple years. I was also responsible for making sure we were making progress within those programs. So the budgeting side, yes, I do understand. As far as labor unions are concerned, I've been a member of a labor union for 24 years. So this would be a new look at the labor union. But yes, I have that basic knowledge of how they work. So I do have that background as well. And you mentioned the buildings and facilities. All I can say is being a teacher for 24 years, being an administrator, I work in buildings. I know the important pieces of that infrastructure and how it supports education. But I also know it's very costly. So I do see that there is a balance that we need to have between making progress with the infrastructure as well as being fiscally responsible for the taxpayers.
Thank you.
Sure.
Just a follow-up, what's your position now with the district? You shared that you have served in a
Sure.
variety.
So unless I receive a call from my principal this summer, which sometimes happens, I am currently going to be a 6th grade language arts teacher. I am also teaching a period of 6th grade course 1 math. However, that will be a virtual class to our 5th grade students, which are off-site in an elementary building. They are accelerated with their math program. So this will be the 2nd year that I teach that enrichment program. So that is daily where we're all logging onto Teams and I'm teaching virtually during the day. Oh, I forgot to mention, I'm also an adjunct professor at Immaculata. So I am constantly looking at research-based practices so that I can teach the future educators. So that is something else that I just enjoy doing. I like reading research.
You mentioned teaching through the pandemic, and I'm sure you've watched some of our meetings during the pandemic. When you serve on the board, your family serves on the board with you. Are you comfortable with that?
I am. When I talked before about how these volunteer opportunities find me, for the past 2 years, I really haven't volunteered. So prior to the pandemic, you could have seen me in the softball concession stand. You would have seen me volunteering with my children, doing some of the things that Mrs. Anoya leads. For the past 2 years, I have not volunteered. But at this point, I feel like I'm in a position and my family's in a position where I can start to enjoy the volunteering opportunities again. I've just started a book club with my daughter's dance group. So the moms are going to be getting together while our daughters are dancing. We're going to really be studying how to be the best moms to daughters that we can be. So I've already started that. And then I feel like this is something that I can now take as another opportunity if it's given to me.
I know I have the term volunteer, but in actuality, this is a public elected office.
Sure.
So I just don't want, I don't want you to think that it's volunteer.
Sure.
There's a lot of involvements, a lot of decisions that we make for 8,000 kids, 16,000 parents, SEI, Glaxo, small businesses over 3 different townships. So all of that's involved with what we do here.
Yes, thank you.
Last question. How have you involved yourself in the Springford area school district community to prepare yourself to be a contributing member of the board?
I feel like I've mentioned some of this before, but just living in the community, I feel as though I've taken the opportunity to serve different pockets of the community. I've mentioned my church community that I've served. I just mentioned I'm starting again with the dance community with many students that do go to Springford. I've talked about the softball volunteering and just really watching you do your work has also prepared me to serve on the board, tuning in via Zoom, which has been really a nice outcome of the pandemic. It's allowed us really to be at home. So thank you. I think it's been able to.
You're welcome.
No, not so good. For those of us at home, we have enjoyed it. I do have to say there's a new level to this experience being actually here on the microphone.
So I gather that you have tuned in on Zoom, which I have. been an
YouTube, I should
advocate
say
for
YouTube.
despite, whatever, but have you attended any board meetings in person or committee meetings? Have you been involved in following the district that way at
So
all?
I have not attended in person in Springford, but in the district in which I work as an administrator, I was attending nightly for years. I presented at meetings before. So recently with my children being young, I've tuned in from home. I felt like all of you were making great decisions. I didn't feel a need to come in person. No.
Great answer.
I mean, really,
And-
that's just my perspective.
And you're saying your kids, how many kids do you have in district?
I have 3 children.
Okay.
They actually do not attend in district anymore. My 2 daughters, I have twins. They are 12. They attended Brook when they were in kindergarten. I was on maternity leave at the time. I was also taking an educational sabbatical with my son. It was a lovely experience. I was able to go in. I volunteered in both of their classrooms. I attended their parades. I took work home to do for their teachers. And then it was the end of the year and we were looking for childcare. I was able to find childcare for my son, and knowing a teacher's schedule as you do, there is really no flexibility with the teacher's schedule. When school starts, teachers need to be there. So we were able to find, my husband is also a teacher. So we were able to find childcare for my son. The daycare opened at 6:30. However, it was very difficult to find daycare for my 2 daughters before school and after school. There were a few that were able to bus them in. However, I was also then looking at all of the days off that they had versus the days off that I had versus the days off that my husband had. And it was becoming really a mother's nightmare. So in order for our family to function, in order for me as a working mom to be able to have a career and have my children in care, I was able to then take them to my district. Now my older girls are 12. They're at the age where they can get themselves on the bus. So we have been talking about coming back to Springford. And our issue now is their dance schedule that starts before I can get them there. So we're trying to work out this summer a way that we could possibly get them to dance on time. So
Just, we're kind of running far afield, but
Yeah, but I gotta get this question out.
sure,
So your kids do not currently attend Springford?
no,
Okay.
they don't. And I didn't believe that that was a requirement to serve on this board. Was I correct?
okay, Dr. Mozart, thank you.
Thank you so much. Dr. Wright, can we take like a 5-minute break?
Right, and if no one's opposed, we'll take a 5-minute recess then.
We just asked that there would not be commingling.
Right.
And then.
Discussion.
Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you.
Fair enough.
All right, at this time, I'd like to resume the meeting. We are at the point where there is a discussion, and we're specifically looking at the procedures going forward and then the voting of the candidates. The board has been made aware of the procedures for the voting. I don't know, Mr. Fitzgerald, do we want to go through that again?
Sure. I mean, all of this is recommended. There's no real black letter law as to how you have to do it. It's just, this is a suggested process. And we had spoken about this at our last meeting in June. Any board member can nominate any candidate. It's not going to require a second. Once we do go through nominations, I would ask that there be a motion and a second, not a vote, but just a motion and a second to close nominations. Each nomination or each voting round would be a roll call where Ms. Bickert will ask who your candidate is, and you would evidence by saying their name. If we get a 5 votes for a particular candidate, they will be appointed to the board. If nobody achieves that threshold of 5, we will look at how many nominations we've had. And my suggestion would be if we have in excess of 2 nominees, so we're 3 or more, that the low vote getter would then be taken off the ballot, and we would then focus in on who we have left. This is all in a way to try to attempt to get to a decision this evening. But again, and I think Mr. Jackson even said this a couple of meetings ago, it's really up to you guys how you want to do this.
All right, so is there any board discussion on the procedures that we had put in place that we had discussed at the last board meeting and that were outlined in the memo and were explained tonight by Mr. Fitzgerald?
Are the candidates going to remain in the room while we're having the discussion?
The candidates are in the room. It's a public meeting. The discussion is not necessarily, the discussion on the agenda is specifically geared about the candidates. It was really meant for discussion of the procedures going forward.
Well, the interviews are public, but we didn't keep all the candidates in here.
But, well, and that part really was to give everybody a fair opportunity to be able to express themselves without having listened to the other candidates before and after that. So, you've had the opportunity to look at their resumes and their letters of intent or of interest, opportunity to ask them a series of questions. And so, really the objective was at this point was to discuss the procedures and then to commence with the voting.
Their resumes were based on them applying for a job. That resume did not, to me, it had nothing to do with school board. 0.
Mr. Fitzgerald, a clarifying question, if I may. Unless Mr. Jackson, you have an additional comment. So if I heard you correctly, just to make sure that I have this correct, anyone can appoint or not, nominate any of the candidates that we heard here tonight. And from there, we will start rounds of voting. So of those who were nominated, we each are going to identify who is our top choice.
Not necessarily, it's just nominating an individual. So your top choice might be X, but that person was already nominated by Ms. Weingarten. So the nomination will just set our field, and then we will vote based on those ballots.
And we're going to second each nomination?
No,
We
so
do
we
not
will
do
just vote for our top choice of those who were nominated.
Once you get to that, yes,
Correct.
then you're voting
Okay.
on who you would want to have on the school board.
Great, thank you.
So we don't all have to nominate.
If you do not have to nominate if you don't want to,
Well, if somebody nominates who you were thinking,
then you're then good to go.
And to clarify, it's not a yes or no on a specific person. When we get to the voting per se, it's saying who you want out of the people on the ballot.
Well, yes, I mean, in my view, and if you look at the agenda, it's I think C and D are really combined, and that is we are roll call voting on the nominees, and if we get to a 5th vote of somebody, you have your board member.
So it is a yay or nay.
It's a yay or nay. It's a yay or nay, and but you're going to be saying their name as a yay.
So for example,
This is not the way we did this last time. I could be wrong, but since I was part of it, I think I'm right.
Well, I was there as well, and I remember it, and there was support by 4 and 4, if I recall. So it was really done similarly, I would think, because I think there were voice votes of names as part of the process.
So are we nominating?
We're seeing if there's any other discussion on the procedure. No? All
I'm
right,
good for now.
okay. All right, Mr. Jackson is good for now. Thank you. All right, well, with that, then I will now accept nominations from board members.
I nominate Jennifer Mutzer.
Okay,
I nominate Michelle Hart. Strong, strong, strong.
are there any other nominations?
I nominate Jonathan Cooper.
Are there any other nominations? If not, is there a motion to close the nominations?
Motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
So we've had a motion and a second to close the nominations. At this time, we have, the nominations are for Jennifer Mutzer, Michelle Hardin, and Jonathan Cooper. All right. With that being said, I'm going to ask Mrs. Bickert if there's,
Yes,
I'm
so
sorry, thank you.
Yeah.
So we have a motion and a second to close the nomination.
they do not have to vote.
We don't.
Nope.
Okay. So at this time, Mrs. Bickert, would you run through the list
No,
and ask each of the school board members which of the 3 candidates that were nominated that they are voting for?
and just to remind, 5 votes will appoint this person to the board.
Okay, Mrs. Deardorff. Dr. Mutzer. Mrs. Earl.
Dr. Mutzer.
Mr. Jackson. Mr. Schaefer.
Michelle Hart.
Mrs. Weingarten.
Dr. Motzer.
Mrs. Zazowski.
I'm going to abstain.
Mrs. Hermans.
Dr. Mutzer.
Dr. Wright.
Dr. Mutzer.
Dr. Mutzer has 5 votes.
All right. At this time, I would like to thank all of the people who chose to do this. We really, I really believe we were very fortunate with all of the candidates, and I hope that you will continue to support not only Springford, but also look for opportunities to be a part of our board. We would be privileged to have you here. So congratulations to Dr. Mutzer. Mr. Fitzgerald, after at this, will we be adjourning and then appointing, or?
No, we
Um,
merged C and D by the 5 votes we've appointed her. And the only outstanding information would be any regulatory requirements of Dr. Motzer in terms of forms for state ethics forms.
So Dr. Motzer, if you could remain here. And are there any other questions or concerns before we adjourn?
I guess it's just procedural. In the board memo, it said there would be a, the oath would be taken tonight. Is that not?
We can do that.
We have the capability of doing the oath. We can do it after the adjournment.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, it can be done in an hour between now and the next meeting.
I was just
Yeah.
wondering when we're doing.
What, I'm sorry, I think we would do it after the adjournment.
Okay.
And then just remain for the oath swearing if you'd like. Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned. Thank you.